Hi, this is Dr. Matt Bowker coming to you as the Profounder Professor, and this week we're going to do a little bit of a longer episode. I'm going to be traveling for the next week, so maybe we'll double up on this one, and I'll have to catch up with you guys in a little while. I wanted today to move on from Plato and talk about Epictetus in particular, who was a Stoic, and in general, the Hellenistic age that he spoke. He never wrote anything that he spoke in and taught in. And that was also a very fertile sort of philosophical breeding ground for a bunch of different schools that you may have heard of, such as the skeptics or the Epicureans or the cynics. I'm going to kind of bop around those, and these videos are all not pre edited or rehearsed in any way. As you can probably tell, it's all one off the cuff, one shot deal. And so I'm not entirely sure of how we'll get where we're going, but I think we'll get to a good place. Epictetus was a Roman slave. We're not quite sure when he lived. We think it might be around 100 in the Common Era. Typically that puts him just outside of the Hellenistic age. But I always think that the Hellenistic age everyone more or less agrees it begins around 300 BCE with the death of Alexander and goes somewhere until the Roman Empire starts running the show, or somewhere around the beginning of the Common Era. I think it should go a couple hundred years into the development of the Roman Empire because these philosophies are still so influential at that time. But it's up to you to decide how you want to consider it. Perhaps it doesn't matter. It's just a matter of taxonomy, really. The Hellenistic era is an era between the demise of the Greek Empire, the Alexandrian Empire and its later end, and then the rise of the Roman Empire. And it's an era of extraordinary change and confusion and sort of cultural, psychological chaos. So there's people meeting new cultures, religions, interacting with each other, people who haven't ever sort of come together before, coming together before, people conquering each other, enslaving each other, obviously, as in Epictetus' case. And it's quite a tumultuous environment to be living in. The main question of the Hellenistic age then, if you take this rather direct line, comes to be, how can I remain undisturbed? How can I preserve my soul? Or how can I find a way to keep intact my mind so it's unperturbed in this chaotic world that we live in? And the various schools of Hellenism have different answers to this problem. I think Epictetus is very interesting in his answer, and I want to talk about him specifically because Stoicism, well, for many reasons, but one is Stoicism is one of really the longest lasting philosophies ever. It has roots in obviously ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and extends really until today. You have modern day people calling themselves Stoics. And every time I turn on my Facebook reels, I see another thing about Marcus Aurelius. And so people are still turning back to this wisdom today to try to find clues for how to lead a good life and a successful life. Sometimes it's warped and twisted by business people into how to lead a wealthy life, which would not have been the goal of the true ancient Stoic. But we'll sort of forgive them that they're picking and choosing from various documents, various sources, meditations of Marcus Aurelius and everybody else. You might have heard of some of the schools, as I mentioned, of the Hellenistic era. The skeptics are fairly famous, fairly well known, usually associated with a guy named Pyrrho of Elis. And he was such a skeptic, supposedly, that he used to need a kind of personal bodyguard because he wasn't quite convinced, or he was skeptical of the fact or the proposition that if he walked off the edge of a cliff, he would fall and die. So he had, or if he approached rabid dogs, he would get bitten or something. So he had people kind of hanging around him, shooing away dangers to make sure he survived the day, because he, was not a person to adhere to any single proposition. And that turns out to be the real crux of ancient skepticism, which is uh, it has a complex philosophical origin. It has to do with a lot of ideas I don't need to get into here, but really the main idea is that any argument you could produce, any proposition you could make, you could equally make the opposite. And that this equality, what they call equipollence, means equal power, means that a person is stuck in a state of not necessarily knowing which is right, and inability to decipher which is right. And while that sounds frustrating, maybe to some, in the skeptical mind, that means that you can just give up. In a way, you can withdraw your attachment to any propositions or beliefs that you might have, knowing that its opposite might just as well be true, and you achieve what almost all the schools of the Hellenistic era are going for, which is a state of soul. Sometimes that's called ataraxia, which is a word that derives from, it means the opposite of disorder or the opposite of tumultuousness. So a state of inner peace, really, inner calm. The famous cynic from the cynical camp, really the most famous one is Diogenes, and he's famous for his washing tub, which he used to sleep in the middle of the marketplace, sort of thumbing his nose at all conventions. And he had the very famous exchange supposedly with Alexander, who said, Diogenes, I've heard of your great wisdom, and I want to offer you anything that you could want. And Diogenes says, humbly and proudly and cynically, just move over a little, you're in my sunlight, like get out of my rays, just get out of my light. And that's all he wants, because he cares so little about the trappings of this world, and knows to be cynical about them and what they mean and whether they're really good, even though people think they're good. Things like power and money and fortune and adventure and other things like that. Epicureanism is a little less understood. I think today there are so many restaurants that have derived their name from the root of Epicurus, Epicure, Epicureanism, or whatever, that we seem to think it's someone with very refined taste. But what Epicurus really said, and it'll be a surprise to some of you, is that so they're correct, these restaurants, in assuming that Epicurus was a hedonist. And a hedonist is somebody who just believes that life's values primarily operate on a register from pleasure to pain, and that that's the most important register. And Epicurus was a hedonist in this sense, although he said, I think interestingly, and with a level of depth of understanding of the human experience, that the greatest pain is fear. So what you should do is abolish fear. And this meant to Epicurus to abolish belief in the gods and hell and other horrifying things that might happen to us in the future. It also meant that one should accustom oneself to a diet of bread and water, because then that would be one less thing to fear. If you ever fell into poverty and could only live on bread and water, you would have already accustomed yourself to this diet, this way of living, and it wouldn't be quite so painful. So it's one less thing, to worry about. Not in the spirit of these sort of fancy restaurants that crop up using the name, and I think some people think it means that the person is a sommelier or a wine expert or an expert foodie or something, but that's not what's going on at all. Stoicism, which is where I wanted to talk a little bit more about today, has a really complex philosophy, and an interesting one if you ever want to delve deeply into some interesting ideas about how the natural world is presented to us, how we understand things, how we come to perceive reality, and how we then generate that into cognitions. There's a interesting writings on Stoicism in this way. The first real central principle of Stoicism is a belief that it's necessary to trust nature. And nature here is a capital N, nature. So The idea is for the Stoics that nature is perfect. It's called teleology. It means things that are going to happen are supposed to happen. And nature never misses its target. I think the line from Epictetus is, just as a target is not set up to be missed, so nature never mistakes its aim, or something like that from the handbook. That's problematic for many people for many different reasons, obviously, but for the Stoics, this provides an extraordinary sense of calm, because you know that nature with a capital N, meaning, again, not just the birds and the bees and the trees, but the physical laws underwriting the human experience and the natural experience and the experience of life and death, are written as they ought to be. If that's true, then one of the goals is to get yourself in line with nature, because if nature is perfect and you can in some way embrace this perfection, you yourself will become perfect. There's a metaphor that he turns to at one point and says, the soul is like wax, like melted wax, ready to receive an impression. And if you can just observe with the right mind nature in its operation, again, capital N, nature, understanding things the way they are, then you can receive a sort of imprint of nature on your soul. It's kind of a beautiful metaphor, really. And the imprint of nature on your soul will then make your soul closer to perfection, because it's closer to nature. So he has this famous example, or this it's my favorite, it's a silly example in the handbook, where he says, this is something you should do every day. Go around your house and find something you like, and say you like a jug that you have. Say to yourself, I am fond of a jug. And when you ask undergraduate students this, or anyone this, really, they say, why would you do that? And the answer is because when you say to yourself, I'm fond of a jug, you're reminding yourself what kind of thing a jug is. A jug at this time would have been made of a breakable material, perhaps clay or something like that. Jugs break, jugs leak, people steal them, they get dropped, they get worn out or dirty or whatever, they fall into disuse in one way or another. And if you announce to yourself in advance that this is the kind of thing you're fond of, you also then, he thought, sort of by extension, would embrace the natural state of what a jug is, its breakability, its inherent vulnerability to the vicissitudes of life and living and occupying a place in someone's home. So this led him then to say something even much more extreme, which people are usually shocked at, which is when you kiss your spouse and child goodbye for the day, remind yourself every day at that moment that you're kissing a human being. For when it dies, you will not be upset. Now that's a little more extraordinary, and I don't think that really jives with what I tend to believe about psychology and attachment and other things that are also natural. But this was his extreme example of how you should remember what things are in their natural form. And when you do that, you begin to see things much more clearly. You understand that things happen to mortal people. If someone you know dies or something, you're not shocked as if you never had imagined that could happen. In fact, that would be a silly thing to think. Instead, you remember, you mourn outwardly and all of that, but inwardly you know, and you've always known, that this is what happens to mortal creatures, because that's what we are. Mortal creatures die. There's a line in the Silence of the Lambs film, famous film, where Anthony Hopkins' character says to Clarice Starling, the FBI agent played by Jodie Foster, that if she really wants to find out what the serial killer bad guy is doing, she needs to ask herself, what is he doing? What is his nature? What's in his nature? What is he really up to? And this leads her, of course, and I'm hoping, I'm probably, this spoiler alert, but one of the things that he is doing is he's subduing and capturing and killing women who have enough flesh on them that he can cut their flesh off and build himself a human suit to accommodate his desire to transform himself into a woman or something like that. And so if you understand that as his motive, you understand a great deal about his psychology, you understand about what the kind of people he's going to target, the kind of places he's going to go, how long it's going to be between his targets, et cetera, et cetera. So ask of each thing, what is it in its nature, is Hopkins's famous line from the Stoics to help Jodie Foster solve her crime. From this natural principle comes the second important part of, I'm rushing, but the second important piece of Stoicism, which is, it is natural to be ruled by something. And it would be best if we could be ruled by the principle within us that holds true to nature, the closest. It's called the hegemonicon, from the word hegemon or hegemony, which you would know means someone or something that's powerful, mighty. The hegemonicon is someone's ruling principle, or their sort of governing principle. So be true to your hegemonicon, be true to your ruling principle. And the ruling principle starts at the very beginning of the handbook, and Epictetus lays it out quite clearly. He says, here's what you need to know if you want to go through life undisturbed. There are two categories of things. There are things you can control, and there are things you can't control. And it's that simple. On the left, or wherever, the things you can control are your opinions, your beliefs, your desires, and your aversions. Things you like, things you don't like, your opinions and thoughts. Everything else falls under the category of things you can't control. Your body, your wealth, your job, other people, your reputation, your public office, your public esteem, how you're treated at a fancy dinner party. And students often balk at this idea because we now live in an individualistic culture that believes in remaking the self and transforming the self and being the sort of captain of one's own ship, where we say we can remake our bodies if we go to the gym 6 days a week, and we can remake our health, and we can get better jobs if we work hard and study in school, and then follow all this advice and perform excellently at work, and we can advance our careers, and we can advance our wealth, and that will in turn lead to better treatment at dinner parties, and we can do all this. We have some might say an inflated sense of our own power. But that's not what Epictetus is talking about at all. He says if you want to be truly happy, you should know that all of these things are, at least to one significant degree, out of our control. No matter how healthy you are, you're still mortal. Or no matter how healthy you are, you could still get hit by a bus. Or no matter how wealthy you are, the stock market could crash, or we could go into a recession, or you could lose your job, and through no fault of your own, or you could get sick, or some tragedy could befall you. You're never fully in control of any of these things. And to think that you are defies nature in some very important sense. It means that we think we have control over something that we don't, and that leads us to erroneous beliefs and opinions about the world. So when we go out into the world, we have to know only what we have power to know, which is, I'm going to be the master of my thoughts, opinions, beliefs, desires, aversions. This is what Isaiah Berlin famously called I think pejoratively called a retreat to the inner citadel, meaning an inward focus. So you go to a Roman bathhouse and you're with your buddy and you spend the whole time being miserable because you're getting splashed and somebody steals your stuff out of the, I don't know, the off the side of the pool, and people are noisy and it's raucous and it's not relaxing at all. And you say, like Anthony Hopkins, or like anyone who's a Stoic and who reads Epictetus, you say, what is this in its nature? Bathhouses are places where people are raucous. They're places where things get stolen. This is what you should expect from that experience. And align your beliefs and opinions with that intuition or that knowledge that this is the nature of the thing you're getting involved in. So in what you do, it's not so much whether you're going to succeed or fail. It's more understand what the thing is that you're getting involved in and what it's going to require. If you want to be a fancy dinner party guest and sit next to the host and receive all the best food first or whatever, you're going to have to pay a price. You're going to have to maybe suck up to the guy throwing the party, and that's a cost to you. You're going to have to kowtow. You're going to have to say things that person agrees with or whatever, even if you don't agree with them. And that's the cost and the nature. So if you don't do those things, don't complain that you didn't get a good seat at the table, because that would be misreading the nature of the thing that you're getting involved in. So that's really, I think, a very nutshell summary of Epictetus's philosophy of nature and of control, which are, I hope you're starting to see the ways that these could link into philosophies that were held even by rulers who believed that you could control by understanding the world better and by understanding the nature of warfare or governance or something like that. You could truly understand what should be done. That makes it one of the longest lasting philosophies of, of all time, and one of the most important. And I hope that this has been a helpful exercise in delving fairly quickly into Stoicism and Epictetus, but also sort of framing those within the broader context of what is now missing in Stoicism, which I think is a kind of disdain for the external world, which is to say the outer world is going to treat you chaotically. It's going to mess with you. You're going to get hit. You're going to get hurt. Things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. And the key is to remind yourself that you're fond of a jug. You're fond of something that you know or should know in your heart of hearts is fallible, vulnerable, liable to be broken. If you're fond of yourself, even if you're fond of your own life, that too is going to have to be let go at some point. And so this, I hope, has been a worthwhile exploration into some of these ideas. And I hope to get back to you as soon as possible. I will get back to making these videos as soon as I can, as when I'm done traveling and a little bit settled. I hope you're enjoying them, and thank you very much.